Tonight's episode of At Home Perspectives is made possible by Pocket Radar. Pocket Radar's smart coach app system, with its unique ability to automatically capture videos with embedded velocities, allows coaches to continue to work remotely with their players and utilize video for digital recruiting opportunities. Stay connected with your players by having them share their videos with verified speed data to make sure that they are staying in shape and continuing to get better. Pocket Radar's Bring Your Training Home initiative will provide education and resources, including webinars and a limited time discount to help players remotely train, develop, and be seen at home with video analysis tools. Check out their 2020 Expo Theater presentation, Digital Age Recruiting and Organizing Your Data with Systems like Driveline Track, located in the ABCA Video Library. Welcome to the American Baseball Coaches Association's At Home Perspectives, brought to you and sponsored by Pocket Radar. ABCA members can access Pocket Radar's 2020 Expo Theater presentation on demand in the ABCA Video Library. Since 1945, the ABCA has been bringing coaches together to educate, mentor, guide, and support the greatest game in the world. Tonight is no exception, as we have a great conversation in store for you. Interact with us on Twitter. Send your questions to @ABCA1945 with the hashtag ABCAAtHome. Let's get this thing rolling. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on this adventure. I can't tell you how excited we are to bring you the first ever ABCA At Home Perspectives episode. It's been a labor of love for all of us here at the ABCA headquarters. Our hope for this series is to educate, entertain, and inspire, to bring great coaching minds together so for a brief moment you can escape what is going on around you and lock into something that you're passionate about, the game of baseball. My name is Jim Richardson, and I will serve as your at-home host every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern until we're able to get back out on the field. These episodes will be archived and available for our members to watch within the Coaching Resource Library sections of our website and my ABCA mobile app. With that, I'd like to have our first ever Pitching Perspectives panel go around the horn and introduce themselves.
I'm Gary Adcock. I'm from California Baptist University with stops at UC Riverside, RCC, Purdue, and UCLA. I'm Matt Blake with the New York Yankees, previously with the Cleveland Indians for the last 4 years, and then before that was running a private pitching instruction in conjunction with Cressy Performance.
Parkland College, which is a two-year junior college in Champaign, Illinois. I was previously the pitching coach under David Garcia, who's a fellow ABCA member. This would have been my second year as head coach at Parkland before the season got canceled. But happy to be here, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, sorry. I figures I'd screw that one up. Derek Johnson, I'm with the Cincinnati Reds. I was with the Milwaukee Brewers before. I was with the Cubs, and before that, I was at Vanderbilt University. Glad to be here.
Caleb Longshore, I'm assistant baseball coach and pitching coach at Belmont University. Stops at Arkansas State, MTSU, Cal Baptist, and Oklahoma Wesleyan before now. I'm glad to be a part of this event.
Joel Mangrum. I'm a pitching coordinator for the Cleveland Indians. Prior to becoming a pitching coordinator, I spent the last couple years as a pitching coach in the organization. And then prior to that, I was a college pitching coach for the previous 13 years.
Dave Serrano, head coach, Cal State Northridge. Started my career at Cerritos Junior College. Been the assistant and head coach at Cal State Fullerton, assistant and head coach at the University of Tennessee, head coach at UC Irvine, and an assistant at West Virginia. And it's a pleasure to be here tonight.
Awesome. All right, folks, one last detail I'd like to go over. If you'd like to interact with us, send us a question on Twitter. You can tweet your questions at ABCA1945 with the hashtag ABCAAtHome. We'll do our best to work them into the conversation. Don't forget to include your name and rep your program. All right, first question on the docket here. Coach Goebel, coaches, with all of this recently discovered time on your hands, What pitching issues have you been locked in on? Problem, solution, big ideas, research, concerns? What's been your focus as of late?
We're trying to take care of all of our pitchers that are currently kind of in limbo a little bit in terms of when they are going to be able to get back on a mound again in a competitive setting. With us, obviously our guys aren't forced into anything until the fall unless they, choose to throw this summer if some of the summer leagues end up popping up later on this summer. So with our guys, it's kind of, whether they're freshman or sophomore, we have some sophomores that are definitely staying in shape right now because they're hoping, that the recruiting will continue to pick up even more as we get into May. Maybe coaches can get out and see some guys throw. So I got some guys right now that it's kind of business as usual, and they've been very creative in terms of trying to make sure that they can still get their work in under the current circumstances. And it's really just trying to help those guys out, whether it be helping them in terms of setting up what their weekly throwing goals should look like, and what type of throwing they're doing, in terms of what they're trying to plan for the best they can, even though there's it's tough to do that right now. So obviously with my guys, maybe whether they're coming back or moving on, I just got a lot of guys going in a lot of different direction and just trying to whether it be through email or text or phone call or just whatever way we can stay in contact to make sure that the guys are receiving proper advice and staying trying to stay as routine oriented as possible given the circumstances that they've been dealt. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I haven't, as far as anything specific from a pitching standpoint, I haven't really dove into anything lately. It's really just trying to take care of my guys in house and making sure that they're in good shape moving forward. So when things do start to normalize and they can get kind of back to the everyday training life, that they don't have to start from scratch again.
Good point. Anybody else kind of want to jump in on that same topic? Like, what have your focus been as of late?
I know a lot of people from the college side of it. Be interesting to get the pro perspective too, and so we can kind of get some Goebel with the JUCO side of it. Us from the Division I and 4-year side, I sent all of our guys an 8-week program when this started to happen to get us built up to get ready for summer ball. We had all of our guys placed, except for 1 or 2 that's prepping for the draft and wanted to do the best we can to have those guys prepared. And so that 8-week program will kind of get us up to about the 3rd week of May. It's got some training that they themselves came up with, some things that they wanted to focus on. And then I implemented some things that, I felt like they needed to work on based off of what we had for the 17 weeks of the season. But it was ultimately all kind of getting them ramped back up to get ready to blend into summer ball. And then if summer ball doesn't happen, we'll break it back down again and start with, hey, what are we going to do from June, July, and August? Overall downtime for a year, I've tried to limit to no more than 4 weeks of shutdown time. And we'll get 2 or 3 of those in the back end of the fall. So I'm trying not to do more than 2 or 3 weeks of shutdown between now and then for our healthy guys too.
This is Dave. It's very interesting for all of us. We're all going through uncharted waters of something we all haven't ever been through. Our guys were up to about 100 pitches when the season ended. And, then you look down, the season was canceled and you're 2 months away from summer ball. So our main focus was to keep their bodies in shape, recommending keeping their bodies in shape and keeping their arm moving. And there's a lot of creativity that has to go on within our players now because they don't have somebody that could just go play catch with or throw to a catcher. They're going to have to find a way to throw against a wall, throw into a net. So it's kind of creating some creativity for players that have been spoiled over all the years because all these open fields, and it's probably it's making them broader because they got to find ways to stay in shape if they want to continue to improve. I mean, I think the reality is for all players out there, you're either going to get worse or you're going to get better. The decision is in your plate now, and it's what you're putting forth. We as coaches can continue to recommend everything that players are going to do, but they're on their own now. I mean, we'd be going into it, finishing our 2nd full month of the season, and we're around them every day. We are only doing Zoom conversations with them or phone calls with them, and we've got to trust what they're doing. My fear is if there is summer ball, that guys are in shape because we may not see them before they leave. So what we don't want is guys to get injured. I think the main thing is keeping their body in shape and continuing to move the arm, whether it's throwing bullpens or just playing catch and long catch, and finding a way to do that every day or as much as possible.
Makes sense.
I think another element for me is the observation. I mean, here in California, we're in the stay-at-home order like everyone else, but man, ESPN and the MLB Network and the Dodgers channel here, it's showing all these old games and the observation. I saw Joaquin Andujar pitch the other day. Holy cow, man, that was legit. It was like I remember it, but now as a coach and seeing it, and Hershiser coming back and throwing on 1 day's rest, and what Randy Johnson did, and all these examples in front of you of guys that attacked the zone and pitched with a mental toughness that we talk about all the time. But now, at least my pitchers, you're going to get a chance to see it. So when I'm talking about a Kevin Brown and you're going, who? You're able to see, man, that guy, or today was Greg Maddox's birthday, so we got to see that sinker all day. Like, holy smokes. So the observation of it, for me, I think is equally as important as any throwing program that we do.
Guys, I got a question who just submitted in here by none other than Mr. John Casey. What do you think is the most important touch point a pitcher needs to create awareness of in his delivery? By the way, Coach Casey wanted to add he's a big fan of Coach Blake.
I'll help jump in here on that one. I think it could be a little bit different for everybody. Delivery is obviously pretty signature to each guy. There's some certain checkpoints, I guess you could say, along the way that we're all kind of looking for. I think from a coaching standpoint, a lot of times that like gather to, basically that high knee point where the balance, phase kind of traditionally is. I think for me, if guys can own that initial kind of like pelvic control or hip positioning from that gather into descent, I think that for me is really where the rest of the delivery is going to flow from. And after that, obviously, we're looking at video and understanding what happens further down the chain. But a lot of times we're really trying to coach those early movements and hopefully set them on the right path, at least in my perspective.
Easy enough.
Yeah, I would offer something similar. I think basically the delivery is sort of slave to rhythm and tempo. And I think everyone's rhythm and tempo is individual to them. It's unique to them. Obviously we have a lot of different things out there about the delivery and mechanics and what's right and wrong and what's optimal and all that. But I do think that probably the first step from a coaching standpoint and even from pitching a baseball would just be like being on time. Like a hitter's got to be on time. A pitcher has to be on time too. And so, for me, before we get into this major scientific biomechanical, dialogue, I think the first and foremost, you sort of look at how does this guy move in time and space. And so you talk about rhythm, one thing happening after another, no stops, no pauses, no gaps. I think you look at tempo and the way that tempo builds through the delivery, whether it kind of goes from slow to really fast, whether it's a little bit more even, whether it's fast from the beginning and continues. Maddie said something about signature, and I think that's 100% right. It's the pitcher's signature. But sometimes we can make guys move better and affect and influence a lot of different things just based on those two really pretty basic elements. Not saying that rhythm and tempo are basic, because it might mean something a little bit different to you than what it does to me. But I think if nothing else, if you can get on the page with your pitchers about what rhythm and tempo is to us, then you have a decent chance of influencing it.
And I think to kind of piggyback on that, DJ, I think that rhythm and tempo component can kind of happen in a lot of places too, where it's like that early transition from the footwork into the gather, or is it the descent where, like you're saying, guys can kind of like pick up tempo, their hands can kind of get jagged. So like trying to find like where that length of the arm path is and kind of how it flows with the torso into landing. So like for me, that's where I've always kind of spent a lot of time, like watching how they play catch and what that looks like, and then hopefully trying to take that onto the slope and then try and build into like, okay, now we're pitching. But yeah, to that point, I think that the more they can own their repetitions with that rhythm and that tempo and their catch play, then it starts to build into the movements they can own on the slope.
I'll ask a question off that. Can I do that, JR? Question.
Yeah,
okay?
Go for it.
Yeah. Talking about that, I mean, with us, with what we see coming in collegiately, you can tell that guys have pieced together their deliveries. A lot of times they're guys that struggle. It looks like you try to go from one part without the tempo, without the rhythm, without the flow to it. So if you guys were just looking at a guy that's pieced together, or if you're a high school coach or a JV coach or a travel ball coach, I mean, at that 14, 15, 16-year-old window when we know motor control is really important to catch guys in that window, better to teach overall movement or try to get guys where they want to be mechanically?
Well, I'd say just to start it off here, for me, I'm always trying to, like with those younger guys, especially if they're not, they don't have a lot of strength in their body yet. I'm really looking at like the footwork and the balance and their ability to control the distance in the ground and how they stabilize into their lead foot. I think a lot of times that just the balance and the footwork alone will kind of set the rest of the delivery up. So if guys have good footwork, it usually goes a long way. So for me, I'm always trying to get them to understand, like, we're trying to either compress time down and make them move their feet quicker, or we're trying to kind of like slow it down and get them to just stay over their base a little bit longer. And obviously the rest of it will, carry from the footwork up. But I think footwork has always been a huge piece for me when I'm evaluating a player as a recruit or as scouting someone. And then obviously when you're coaching them in the trenches.
I can jump in here and help too. I agree, Maddie. I think a lot of times, particularly the younger guy, you're trying to get an idea of where their mind's at, how confident they are with the way they're currently moving, the changes that they're trying to make. And then I think a lot of times you can see that with how they're interacting with the ground, particularly earlier in the delivery, similar to what you and DJ were talking about. It just kind of gives you an idea of where they're at currently mentally, what they're trying to accomplish, and then also too, just their intentions behind what they're currently doing.
All right. Well, we had another question come in here via Twitter from Tim O'Brien. How do you teach relief pitchers how to warm up to enter a game? And I know a lot of guys would think that, this may be more college, high school level, but you pro guys, every dude you have was probably a starter. Like, this has got to be something you guys struggle with a lot. How do you focus and teach a guy who's been a starter his whole life to be a relief pitcher, how to warm up and enter a game?
I'll kind of kick this to Joel in a second because him and I work together in Cleveland. But I would say anecdotally, one of the biggest challenges we've seen on the pro side is that low A full season level, when those guys really start to pitch out of the pen for the first time in cold weather. For us, it was in Ohio, and we've got a lot of Latin American pitchers who've never really experienced snow or things of that nature. So they're used to be able to get ready in, short amount of time. So I think what we've spent a lot of time getting them to understand is what the flow of the game feels like and kind of maybe what situation they get into. So, Joel, maybe you can kick in on some of the kind of procedures or processes that we kind of ran through and you guys kind of help institute over there.
Yeah, absolutely, Maddie. I think the biggest thing that we try to do is just communicate well with our guys, try to create a system, try to make sure that our guys understood kind of where our brains were at as coaches. We typically, to make it really, really general, we talked about being a red, yellow, or green, and for our guys just to kind of prepare them, because as everybody on this panel is aware, anything can happen throughout a game. You have to be ready to get hot in a hurry. And I think that creating a system for guys to be able to kind of move through so that they never get caught off guard, because typically that's where guys coming into games, they underperform. And so for us, it was really, really simple. Red was basic movement quality stuff. Could be stretching, could be mobility work. Into yellow, which is more like band work, weighted ball work, some free catch. with the catcher standing up, and then green was basically get hot, and we never tried to skip through a step. We just tried to prepare our guys as best we could, and then just think ahead of the game. And I think that obviously that was our main job as coaches within our organization, and then prepping our guys for success that way.
Nice.
I would just offer, I would actually start backwards and let's go to the game first. First off, every reliever you have has to remember he has 8 warm-up pitches to throw before he has to throw a competitive pitch against a hitter. And I think a lot of times we forget about that. We forget about that as coaches. Certainly our players forget about that too. You can use those 8, and you should use those 8 as best as you possibly can. And a lot of times, it might not be this way in every situation or every scenario, but in a lot of scenarios, you're trying to get a guy hot, you're trying to get him ready. You're basically waiting on the phone call or the walkie-talkie or whatever. Just keep in mind that there is a little bit more time for a pitch. A slow walk can help for that. There's a time for a couple more pitches, and he has the 8. In terms of being on the mound, so we're in that green spot that Joel's talking about. The first thing I want to do is I want to get my number one pitch going as fast as I possibly can. Obviously, we're going to start with a fastball. I want to get to that second pitch as fast as I possibly can, keeping in mind that I have the 8. And then, from a sort of maybe more simple idea of kind of maybe what Joel and Maddie were talking about, I love the red, yellow, and green. I think it's really cool. I just think that you have to figure out ways to help these guys move in between innings, which a lot of times if you're looking down in a bullpen, they're not doing. In the college setting, a lot of times they're in the dugout. Get them out of the dugout. Get them moving around. There's a lot of cool implements out there now. I'm not looking grandstanding for any one of them, but something like the throwing sock. It's cold out. You take that throwing sock and you're in the dugout in between innings, or you're getting ready to throw, and you put that thing on and you move a weighted ball around a little bit before you have to go out there. Calisthenics, any sort of mobility work you can get going with. Just don't let your relievers be lazy. And, at least in the pro setting, a lot of times those guys are down in the bullpen. I get it. It's a bazillion degrees in Knoxville, Tennessee, or wherever they're at. And, it's not a lot of fun on that 10 o'clock, morning game that those guys are playing. At the same time, just make it a habit to get those guys moving in between innings. That helps just about as much as anything.
I'll chime in on this too. I think that was a great point by DJ. It's not so much about getting your guys ready. You could get them in a routine, but I think the thing that goes unnoticed, especially in college baseball, is how many pitches guys throw in the bullpen before they ever come in the game. And when we talk about weekend series, you could have a guy get up, you could set him down, get him back up. By the time he enters the game, if he goes an inning, he's already thrown 30, 40 pitches down in the bullpen. You're not going to have him available for Saturday or Sunday. So I think it's about getting a routine to get guys ready with bands or all the stuff DJ talked about, but it's not overusing them in the bullpen so you lose them over the course of your weekend or for the week.
Yeah, good point, Dave. I like that too. The other way you could look at that is, if you do have some people down there that you can communicate with, you could talk about a 1-for-1, a 2-for-1, and a 3-for-1. So for every game pitch that's thrown, if you're in that 1-for-1 setting, he's matching the game pitches. He's trying to get himself ready. He's trying to get hot. The 2-for-1 is for every game pitch, or for every 2 game pitches, he's throwing a pitch in the bullpen. 3 out of 1, it's for every 3 pitches in the game, we're throwing a pitch. And that way, if he's ready, he's not trading out 1-for-1. He may be going for that 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 so that he's still hot, he's ready, but he's not overdoing it.
Yeah.
I think one last thing that we've had some success with that I didn't do 5 years ago was in practice. I used to list always who pitched and in what order, and that's what we did every practice. And about 5 years ago, I decided, hey, I'm just going to list the starter. And you got to teach these guys, as the question says, how to warm up and enter a game as a reliever. Well, that's new to them. So they're not going to know when they enter the center squad. Sometimes I'm going to give them plenty of time. Sometimes I'm going to give them a short amount of time. Sometimes I'm going to give them over information. Hey, you're looking like the fourth or fifth, or you're the closer. Sometimes I'm just going to surprise them. So I try to take our fall, which I didn't do early on as a pitching coach, and make it feel more like a game. And, you know, for us, 2 pitches and you're ready to go. So once they tell me they got 2, sometimes I enter the game even before they've warmed up their 3rd pitch, trying to get them used to something they might encounter in the season.
Something we did this year I thought was really valuable out of the pen. We were going through the fall and noticed that our hitters had a hard time in a bunting situation if it was a pass ball or a stolen base, if the at-bat changed, you know, and they went from trying to sacrifice to then trying to hit, and they were just throwing the bats away. And I was like, you know, we see guys struggle out of the pen too because the situation changes. So I would try to put 2 guys in the pen at all times, one to start a clean inning the next half, and then a guy to bring in situationally. And that situational guy knew that he was going to enter the game with people on base and exactly how he was going to attack it. And he didn't have to worry about, you know, would he be starting the next inning or not? And if it passed him on, then we would sit him back down, and the guy that was getting prepped actually starts the next inning. It did play itself out that way. And I thought guys had a lot better mindset coming in out of the game because the situation was what they were prepping for, and it wasn't one that changed on them.
All right. Well, the next question is going to be coming in from Michael Lamorta. He's the assistant coach from Winter Springs High School in Central Florida. Essentially, what he wants to know is, you know, before everybody departed from campus, from spring training, what did the programs you gave them to do at home look like? And how are you following up with them either daily or weekly to see if they're on pace to achieve whatever it is you want them to achieve? So what'd you give them to do at home, and how are you following through with those guys to make sure it gets done and they're on pace?
So first off, they kicked us out of camp pretty abruptly. So, I mean, literally they locked us out of the complex and said, you guys got to go home. So there really wasn't a ton of time, you know, to make any sort of arrangements one way or the other. What we did is we split up all of the guys that were in camp and our 40-man roster guys, and basically gave them a survey to fill out. And the survey consisted basically of, you know, what do you have access to? What don't you have access to? You know, where are you going to be? What kind of equipment do you have? You know, so on and so forth. Once we kind of gathered that information, then it was more along the lines of, you know, weekly calls. There wasn't a program in place. I think the one thing that's a little bit unprecedented that we're going through right now is that it's one of the first times in baseball that we don't have a date, right? No one has a date. Yeah. And pitching coaches rely on dates pretty heavily, you know, because we'll start at that date and we'll work our way backwards for how we're going to train and what we're going to do. And with no date really in sight, it's really hard to get programming. But this is also, to me, and I'm not trying to get on a soapbox here, but to me, this is a really great time. And Dave mentioned this earlier, you know, creativity, self-reliance, and patience too. You know, I do think that you have to sort of fend for yourself. I mean, if, in my mind, this is a tremendous opportunity for our players to know themselves even better than what they do right now. And we're searching for the same things that y'all are. Like, if you're a high school program or you're a college program, you're trying to teach your young men who they are and, you know, certain virtues and whatnot. Major League Baseball, minor league baseball, it's the same thing. These guys are still learning who they are. So in my mind, this is a really great time for them to try to do that. We did just kind of give a program, and it's real basic in nature, on how to build up in case we do start sometime in June. You know, we know that there's a really good chance that we either have to prolong that program, or we have to, it'll even be shorter. The one thing that we're probably all kind of sure of is that if they allow us to come back, our spring training is going to be really short. So we want them to be as ready as they possibly can be. And then at the same time, also kind of look at other factors like, how they recover. And that could be a subjective thing. It can be an objective thing. And this is a good time to retest all the assessment stuff that we did at the beginning. So we'll be doing that kind of stuff too. And hopefully what we come up with is once we do start again, is like, okay, what's the best route for us to take with our starting pitchers? What's the best route to take with, these three relievers who recover really well versus maybe these 2 or 3 guys who don't recover as well. So just trying to make, as smart and informed a decision as we can.
I'll chime in on that and say for coaches out there or players out there, there's nothing you could be doing is wrong would be wrong if you're doing something. It's just about doing something. And as DJ said, it's just getting creative and finding ways to get something done. No one's going to look at you and say you shouldn't have been doing that as long as you were doing something. And that, as a coach, that's my biggest concern right now is, again, I go back to what I said at the opening, is that my concern is, are they doing it? Now, we aren't going to have to do anything with them until, if there isn't summer ball, until the fall. For the pro guys on here, their concern is, as DJ said, when they do say we're getting started, they've got to hope that their guys are in shape, at least doing something, because they're going to have a short window. And then if they haven't been doing anything, unfortunately, that's when you're going to see injuries and lack of performances because they haven't been doing something at least. But I think just doing something, you're not wrong if you're doing something. I don't think anyone could give you a program, because none of us have ever gone through something like this to set a program for. It's just finding ways to get something done every day.
And just to kind of follow up on that, it's obviously to DJ's point, like there's no date here that we're working off of, so it's hard to like plan for anything. I think one of the things we've tried to do is kind of idle them a little bit so that they still have some level of training stress on them. So we've kind of gone to, and you might hear this from the strength training world, but like more of like a high-low model where it's just like at least there's, some level of stress, 1 or 2 times a week. That's what we would consider high stress, so that we're still putting some tissue down and kind of getting them to recover from it. And then there's probably 1 or 2 days a week where there's some low stress, or they're kind of just like moving the arm a little bit, just so that they're kind of keeping in rhythm of like put some like stress on them and then recover from it, put some stress on them and then recover from it, with the idea that these guys might be playing until November this year, or December, depending on what the circumstances look like. So we don't want to carry too much volume trying to keep them ready. But at the same time, if we just, shut them down altogether, then we're going to have the same issue of the longer ramp up. So it's really, whatever that high stress looks like. It could be off the mound, it could be long toss, it could be weighted balls. It kind of left it open for these guys to kind of work with, what do you have available to you, and like how can you accommodate some of these requests. And then one of the things that we've kind of leaned on a little bit to kind of help keep track is just created a shared, Google Doc form. And I think that this helped them, not for us to, watch over them, because luckily for us, our guys are really accountable at the level I'm at, but I think for them to see what each other are doing more than anything, so that they have some level of conversation around it. And what are you looking to do right now? Or what are you working on? Or they can see the other guys instead of having to make, 30 different text messages. So I think we've tried to just create more collective awareness for what everyone's doing within our group. And I think that's helped kind of keep them all in a similar boat.
Yeah, and Maddie, I would it's crazy just because we have coaches from all different levels and we have all different problems. I mean, similar in nature of minor league baseball to what DJ said. Our guys were kind of rushed out of our complex quickly. We were doing the best we could to make sure that their health was number one. And then from there, it's basically just take note of what our players have access to. We sent out a throwing program of best case scenario. If you have access to a mound, if you have access to a net to be able to throw into, because obviously, I mean, I think the big thing to your point, Matt, is like we want our guys to continue to get, to accumulate stress. I mean, we have to think a little bit about the work volume, because if they take a huge dip this year and we're not adding stress leading into the following year, I mean, it makes you slightly concerned. But at the same time, I mean, we want to keep our guys, playing catch for the people in their household, doing the things that they're capable of doing. And similar to what Coach Serrano talked about, I mean, what's most important is they're doing something. And for our guys, I think the biggest thing is just our communication with our coaches. Our coaches are staying in touch with our players about once a week. once every week and a half, and just communicating that with our guys and making sure, number one, that their wellness is good, but two, what are you actually accomplishing? And then some of the shared videos that our coaches are sharing with our staff about our players and what they're currently doing has been really tremendous to allow us to follow up with some of the things they're doing.
Outstanding. Well, speaking of creativity, we have a question from Coach DeChico. They're kind of curious of outside of the box restrictions, constraints you've had success with adding to bullpen sessions, essentially to increase the awareness or difficulty on the pitcher.
I can start this off. I got to hear Dave speak. Dave, what was that, in San Diego? And Dave Serrano spoke to how every bullpen that he tried to throw, he tried to make game-like. And that really resonated with me, and I've really tried to add that to what we do. Now, we have some thematic bullpens. By that, I mean we have themes, like it's a two-strike pen, or it's a cross-count pen, or it's a plus runner pen. But we make the bullpens very rarely mechanical. I have my mechanical bullpens, but I really set them based off of what I learned a long time ago, that, man, if we're going to be 1-3 to the plate, I got to have the watch right there. If we're going to work on a two-strike breaking ball, then we're gonna throw it, and we're gonna work on sequencing, or tunneling as it's called today. So for me, in the basic form, we just try to make the bullpen probably mechanic less a lot and more game-like, and we've had a lot of success with that philosophy.
I can tell you that there's a video within our coaching resource library of Justin James over at Point Loma, who had a very unique bullpen session. And the video kind of just encapsulates trying to make his bullpen sessions as game-like as humanly possible. He puts his pitchers in the dugout on the bench, and one at a time, they do not know the order. One at a time, he yells out a name. They run to the bullpen. They get 4 to 5 pitches to warm up in the bullpen. Then they come out and they throw their pen on the field. All the time, he is having his other players heckle this pitcher as he's getting warmed up. And it's very interesting the extent that he went to make his bullpen as game-like as humanly possible. I'm not doing the video justice, trying to explain it, but it's a free video for all of our members in the ABCA library. And it's got to be a unique way to practice. So
I'll jump in and say, going off what Gary said, I think that the pressure of their bullpen should be higher than even the game. A couple things that we've done to make it more game-like, because of the visual that they don't get to see, is we've had guys stand in there showing early show bunt. That's something a pitcher never sees. Every coach on here, when he talks to his pitching staff, he says the most important part of a bunt defense is throwing strike one. Yet our pitchers don't visually see that in their bullpens every day. They never see a guy standing in front of the plate holding a bat. So I think something like that's important. One of the things we've gone to also is having guys throw on the main diamond with base runners at second base. So they're having to do their looks, and they're trying to stop the guy from stealing third. That, to me, is taking it to another level, and kind of going what Gary said. It takes out the mechanical part of it, and it's making more of the mental training to build mental toughness for them to overcome hard things on a daily basis. Now, I'm not saying we do that every day. There's mechanical bullpens where they're trying to get a feel for the movement of their fastball, the breaking ball touchy, and changeup touchy and feely. But I think there's another level you could take, especially at the collegiate level, that you could take to maximize their bullpens, where it's not just, I think there's throwing a bullpen, and then there's throwing a bullpen, of getting to the level of competing at the highest level when you're asked to in a baseball game.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in there. One thing with us, with the junior college guys, we're constantly trying to balance putting ourselves in the best position to produce and pitch well in games, but also trying our best to try to develop the things that are going to be, things that coaches are looking for in recruiting. With our guys, a lot of times they'll jump in there, and there's camaraderie with the coaching staff there, but they'll kind of, tell me a little bit as far as, what direction they want to go with their bullpen on any given day based off what the current goals are and what they're working on. Obviously, like, one thing that was really big for us recently is the addition of the Rhapsody. I know that's not necessarily a constraint, but that was huge for our off season and beyond in terms of trying to, whether it was design new pitches for guys, mainly enhance what they had, not necessarily full go redesigns or anything like that. But our guys, they'll throw lower intent pins where it's more of a touch and feel, and they're trying to make sure the movement quality is there to a certain extent. They're going to throw their live sessions towards hitters, like the coaches were saying about, trying to make it as game-like as possible, and we want those to be as competitive as possible, and make sure the juices are running there, which our guys typically don't have a problem with that. And then there's your maybe a little bit more normalized bullpen where you're sequencing different pitches, or you're working on a particular off-speed pitch that you're trying to add in. But that's something with our guys. I mean, one, I think it's probably ideal to always get your side sessions in as much as possible, but that's something, especially as the season progresses in the spring, I don't necessarily force on the guys. Our top priority is going to be kind of how they physically feel on game day. And if that means, jump and ship on a particular typical mound day to look at something, a different training modality for that day to make sure that they're feeling. I tell my guys all the time, I've never ran into a pitcher that didn't feel good physically on game day, but was confident because he threw a good bullpen 2 days before. And I've never met a pitcher that felt awesome warming up on game day, but then was worried because he didn't get his pen in 2 days before. Game day is really the priority as far as physicality and how you're feeling. So that's something that we definitely factor in with our bullpen work too. Like I said, I think it's ideal to always get those sides in, and that's the perfect world. But every recovery week has its own personality, and you don't really always live in a perfect world in baseball. We all know that. So you got to kind of do what you can to make sure on game day you're ready to roll. So that's kind of, we're probably a little bit more liberal than most in terms of what we do from that regard. But I think the guys appreciate it, and they tend to react well from it. So, but.
Nice. Well, this next question is for Coach Longshore. Coach, I know you got a bunch of young pups on your pitching staff. How can you keep the focus on development while having those guys contribute to helping Belmont win now?
Yeah, I think a lot of it for us, I think the most important thing that you can do is when those guys come in is identify what's important to you as a coach. I think if you ask our upperclassmen now to name all 3 or 4 things that are important to me, they could do it. And I think that's where, I messed up in previous years. I mean, there's so many good things out there and so many good ideas, and there's some bad ones too that, I'm pulling from Twitter or listening to guys that are on this panel, and I've got all these different things. I worked for Gary for a while and, learned a ton of stuff under him, but also had to figure out what was important to me and then convey that to your younger guys coming in. 4 things that I think are really important that each one of those guys that we sit down in meetings and talk about, whether it's one-on-one or as a team, no particular order, none more important than the other, but controlling the count, controlling yourself, controlling the running game, and then establishing routines. For those young guys, I'm not getting the 92 to 94 mile an hour guys out of high school. Like, you got to be able to control the count. Like, if you can't cross count with a breaking ball, if you can't cross count with a changeup and stay out of hitters' counts with fastball, you're probably not going to have a really good chance of being successful. You can't pitch frustrated, talking about controlling yourself. Heard DJ say it time and time again. Are you over the rubber? Or are you over the plate? And so if we're working on something mechanically in a bullpen, then, hey, we can't be concerned and get frustrated with what's happening over the plate. At the same time, you can't go out on the mound and compete and default to your frustration of where your mechanics are. Like, you just got to find a way to get through it. All of our guys coming in were 1-3 or less. Left-handed, right-handed, great move, not a great move, whatever, just because I think that's a constraint, and talk about bullpens with constraints or good runners. I mean, hitters and base runners are your biggest restrictions and constraints we'll ever face, So getting them to be comfortable with those moments, I think, is huge. And then establishing routines. Like, when you come in, we talk about, all the things that are important, and I lay out a buffet of different things that you can do, different ways to go about, being 1-3 to the plate, different ways to go about your throwing program, what you like, what you don't like, And then after about 3 or 4 weeks of that training phase, as we start to get into the competition side of the fall, I think it's really important at that time that you start having an idea of how to establish those routines, your throwing program, your structure of it, pre-throw, post-throw, pre-pin, post-pin, pre-competition, post-competition. All those things have to start coming into something that over an amount of time, you can have that foundation and start to tweak it. And then the biggest thing, I think, is not overwhelming them. For us, this past year in our league, ball and play average on 89 mile an hour to 92 mile an hour fastball was under 300. Ball and play average from 88 to 90 mile an hour fastballs was like 350, but 86 to 88 was under 300 again. And I think, describing that to the guys to say, hey, until you get to that 91, 92, 93 range, let's learn to pitch within these constraints, within these elements. And then as you continue to grow and develop and we add velocity and you add strength to clean up the delivery, then that's not going to do anything but make you better and better. But keeping it simple, keeping them focused on what's important to me, and then starting to blend in the things that they do well with what's important to me.
Now, Coach Adcock, I know that kind of ties in to stuff I've heard you talk about before in regards to simple routine and pitcher development and 5 things that make a successful pitcher. I know you and Caleb have worked together in the past. Are there any similarities between the two, or how does that kind of tie in?
Yeah.
I'll preface, I plagiarized it all. So.
No. It's, it completely ties in. I mean, I think everyone says pitching is 90% of the game, right? But the resources collegiately, when I was in the game 30 years ago, was we had 3 coaches for position players and 1 for pitchers. And what I saw change when I worked for Doug Schreiber at Purdue was he hired 2 pitching guys, Rob Smith at Ohio and myself. And we were able to collaborate and work together on what we thought a successful pitcher would look like. And I tested the formula against everybody I could ever do. And it came out the same every time. These guys do these things. And I do think we're in an age for pitching coaches, because I hear this from a lot of guys. I heard from some people today where it's the best of time to be a pitching coach, but it's also the worst. And what I mean by that is when I started 25 years ago in the coaching world, it was 3 things. I observed, I collaborated, and I read books. That's the only way I learned. So, I was flexing my T, and I was posturally stable, and I was reading all those things that we did. And I was talking to Dave Serrano about change-ups and doing those things. And now, today, all the information is out there, is abundant on Twitter and on different websites, to the point that I think it's confused a lot of people. It's got even a person like myself who's been in the game for 25 years at times even doubting, do I know what I'm doing and am I teaching it correctly? I think the key is this. My pastor says this all the time. You can have knowledge and I can preach to you, but if you can't apply it, it's useless. So for me, we've tried to simplify our pitching into 2 things. We want to keep it simple and we want to keep it routine based. We want to work on those 5 areas. We want to be mentally tough. We want to have increased command. We want our stuff to be better. We want to be durable. And we also want to field our position. And every practice we write, and I've sent some stuff out that I think you're going to put so people can read through in more detail. Every practice I write has those 5 elements in it. I played for some great coaches, and I'm not talking bad about those, but I shagged a lot of BP. I ran a lot of poles, and I hit a lot of fungos. And I knew when I became a pitching coach, I wanted to decrease that, be able to do that, but work on those 5 areas. And so that's what we do. We come up with focus in 5 all the week of fall where we have a focus. This is the mental thing we're focusing in on. It's attacking hitters. This is the PFP thing. We're holding runners, and we're working on cross-count pitching. And we pick something, and I've listed that, and the viewers can look through that if they choose. And we cover those things each week. Mechanics plays a part in all of it. Absolutely. It weaves its way through all 5 of those things. But if you're going to ask me to choose, do I want a mechanically sound pitcher or a guy that's mentally tough, that can compete, that's 1-3 of the plate, that conceals his pitches, that pitches with a great tempo, that attacks hitters? I'm going to choose that all the time. And I get mechanics will increase all those things. 100%, I understand that. But for me, the development of a pitcher is those 5 areas done daily in a routine. And if we can do that, I think we have success. And I've found that our pitchers have done that.
Awesome. Well, I can tell you guys, audience members, what Coach Adcock is referencing is some of the documents he submitted to me before this presentation. As soon as this thing finishes up, I'm going to upload those to our resource reference area within our My ABCA app. You just click on the More button, and you'll see a little Resources tab, and you'll be able to view and download those documents. But unfortunately for you non-members listening, you'd have to be a member to access something like that. With all that aside, we've had multiple questions about change-ups. How to teach it, how to develop it, how to get kids to trust it. This question is open to anybody who wants to jump in on it.
I'll jump in. It's the best pitch in baseball, whether you're sitting here as a pitching coach in professional baseball, college baseball. I'm not so sure about high school baseball, to be honest with you, because sometimes I feel that's doing some hitters a favor. But it's a pitch that has to be developed. And I think the biggest issue with the development of a pitcher throwing a changeup is the trust factor. Is the trust factor that he's taken something off his fastball and he feels he's doing a favor. And when you don't have the trust factor, you tend to slow your mechanics down and you slow your arm down. And it's all about the arm speed. And I believe it's developed through catch play. And where I've seen the most development is through playing long catch with the changeup grip. Now, I'm not going to go on here and say that there's a certain grip that is a perfect grip for a changeup, because everyone's hand is a little bit different and everyone's grip strength is a little bit different. The one I've had the most success with is what I call is the moderate circle change, and that's just a pitchfork right down the middle of the seams like a two-seam, with the pressure on the index finger and the thumb underneath. The difference is with the circle, the thumb and the index are together. With mine, it's the thumb is underneath the baseball. But that isn't the perfect grip for every person. There's a short story I'll tell. When I had Ricky Romero at Cal State Fullerton, Ricky had an outstanding breaking ball. And after we committed him and signed him, I asked him during summer ball, he was playing Connie Mack baseball, to put the curveball away for the summer. I taught him a changeup grip and told him to throw the fastball and the change throughout the summer. Ricky's velocity, and it wasn't because he did this, is because he was growing up, increased by about 4 miles an hour, and he ended up having a changeup that I feel, besides all the other stuff he did, helped him get to the big leagues when he was able to get to the big leagues. It's a pitch that I think every pitcher should have, every pitching coach should insist on, because you can ask any hitter in baseball, and the changeup is the toughest pitch to hit in baseball. But there's no secret method to it in my mind, because everyone's a little different, just like anything in pitching. And every grip, every person is going to have a different grip. And it's all about the trust and the arm speed that's going to allow guys to be successful with that.
So are you saying potentially you start every guy off with that pitchfork grip and kind of work from there?
I don't change the grip. A lot of guys come to me where I've been in college with the circle changeup, and I will not change it. Just like I don't change anyone until I see that there needs to be change. I'll show them that, and if a guy grasps it, I'll let him run with it. But again, it's what they're going to feel comfortable with, because it goes back to the trust factor. I'm not going to have them do something that they don't trust. So I don't tell every guy you have to do this with your grip, but I evaluate and see what the action of their pitches are doing. But a lot of time it is in the grip. It's the arm speed and not slowing down the body that's going to make the difference.
Makes a lot of sense. Anybody else want to jump in on change-ups?
I would add just a couple of things, because I think trust is probably first and foremost. I love the idea of, maybe something along the lines of, to me, this circle changeup that everyone loves and everyone teaches. I like it too. I think it's a great pitch when it's a great pitch. Unfortunately, this is sort of like the black belt of grips. If you look at this grip, if you're just looking at this, you're going, there's not anything natural about this. It looks awkward. It looks strange. So I think kind of along those lines of what Dave was saying, looking at a pitchfork type of thing. I'm going to start with a guy's fastball if he throws a four-seam or a two-seam, and I'm going to work from there, basically kind of thinking about fastball properties. Number one, that thumb is underneath the middle of the ball. The middle finger, generally speaking, is somewhere around the middle of the ball. And, we talk a lot about staying behind the ball and making the ball spin. Well, this is a pretty good way of doing that. And then I think if you just sort of look at, kind of taking that a step further, that's the pitch fork. And then as I get better at it, if I need to be more on the inside of the ball, then I trade my ring finger for my middle finger, and now I'm a little bit more on the inside of the ball. I can close this thing up and make it a circle if I want to, but it's an evolution, right? Like there's this test retest type of feel to it, where I'm starting with the four-seam fastball because I trust that, and then I'm making something, turning this pitch into kind of a modified four-seam fastball. And if I start there, then I can evolve, into the further steps as I go. I think the other thing about the changeup that we're all guilty of, I know I am too, it's like, well, we'll just use it to get back into the count, unless you have that swing and miss changeup. I completely disagree with that. I think every time you throw a pitch, you ought to expect an out. So every time I throw this changeup, it's about an out. I'm not trying to get from 1-0 to 1-1. I'm not trying to get 2-0 to 2-1. I'm trying to end the at-bat right here with this pitch. So I'm throwing it in the zone. It's gonna hopefully create some sort of contact, and I'm getting an out on it, or I'm getting some sort of some sort of circumstance. I think guys think of this pitch like, well, it's a third pitch. No, it's another pitch. It's another pitch that I'm going to use to get you out, and kind of simple as that.
I could actually add to that, DJ. I love that point about trying to get them out on that pitch. I mean, I think the biggest thing too with the confidence is just, what are you trying to do with the changeup? I think most guys think I'm trying to subtract velocity off of it. It can also play too with the type of spin that you're trying to embark on the ball. I think that one thing that technology and analytics and the things that have taught us today is like changing spin on the ball and actually creating separation vertically can create just as much swing and miss, or just as quick of a one pitch out as anything. And I think that confidence and understanding of, being able to relay that to our guys of, this is what we're trying to accomplish with it. To your point, we're trying to get an out, but this is how we're going to get an out. And then working the grip off of that, and trying to mix that into what our repertoire looks like.
I'd like to add, if I could, to everything that was great here. I learned about 10 years ago, for us collegiately, I know it probably wouldn't work professionally, throw the thing center. Like we don't throw our 2-0 changeup, we throw it center. We throw our 0-0 changeup center. We throw our 0-1 changeup center. We're contact driven. We want it put in play, but there's never a time we're trying to throw the faded changeup that starts off and then goes in. We've had success collegiately thinking down center. If we're throwing a changeup, we want it put in play and we want it down center. Just that simple. Sticking with the simple theme.
That's a great point, Gary. Something I missed to say is that's throwing the changeup over the plate is the most important thing, and that's where the trust factor comes in. We all as coaches have thrown BP, and the coaches that are listening right now have all thrown BP, and they all know you throw the same speed, you take a little bit off that pitch, and the guy's going to be out front, and that's what you want. The effectiveness of the changeup. You want the guy to put it in play, and because a lot of times it's going to be a weak ground ball or a weak pop up.
One thing that I would like that, kind of what DJ was saying about the way the grip, usually if I got guys that come in and they don't have much of a changeup, or I ask them, let me see your changeup or this and that, and they say, well, I haven't thrown it much. I like to take, whatever their favorite fastball grip is, whether it's 4-seam or 2-seam, and just throw that with your middle two, as opposed to your middle and your index, and go from there. But one thing I noticed with our guys, and this is, it's more anecdotal, it's not really backed up by data or anything, but just from experience with our guys, the guys that are a little bit more efforty and a little bit more connected into foot strike with where their arm's at, those guys tend to have a little bit better feel for more of a split grip, or like a fosh ball with our guys, as far as not necessarily having the finesse to get it inside. And the guys that are a little bit more longer armed in the back, and maybe quote unquote, maybe a little bit late with the arm, tend to be able to roll through the inside part of the ball a little bit. So that's something with our guys, just kind of understanding mechanically kind of where your guys at in terms of letting him have the options, maybe play with some different things that might be more useful for him. I have noticed that, for me, the circle changeup is probably a little bit more maintenance in terms of having it on a day-by-day basis for a younger amateur pitcher, where kind of like Gary was saying, where maybe a split grip or like more of a fastball grip is you just grip it and you just throw a fastball strike down the middle, and keep it as simple as that. Obviously that's not for everybody, just like a particular circle change may not be for everybody. But I think kind of like all the coaches are saying, having the freedom to let a guy kind of self-organize himself a little bit into finding what works best for him, is probably the best way to go about it.
Just to comment on the changeup usage in there too. I mean, I've been really fortunate. JR was with us last year. We've got one of the top analytically changeup guys in the country collegiately. It's really good. And his grip is like DJ was talking about. It's pretty much just two-seam fastball, just with the other two fingers. Same thing Jon just talked about. But for us, especially in our league, if you're familiar with the OVC, it's a lot of times the offensive valley, not the Ohio Valley. Being able to chill. Mangrum's laughing because he's been there. But the changeup can be swing and miss, especially if you pitch in. I mean, a lot of our right-handed pitchers have gotten to where, they kind of look to back foot it just like a lefty would back foot the slider to a right-handed hitter, just tunnel it off the fastball in. And then it's become a cultural thing when you got a guy that throws a really good one. Everybody on our team wants to know, hey, man, how do you throw that thing? And so then everybody's just grabbing for that information. And this year, highest ever, we were 67% strikes with a changeup over the first 17 games. And it's just because they're feeding off of each other. It's nothing that I've done. They just seen somebody that's really good with it, and everybody wants to be, hey, I want that pitch too.
Makes sense. So DJ, did you show Luis Castillo how to throw his changeup then, or how did that work?
No, but he's showing everyone else. Just like Caleb just said. I mean, he's right. Like when a guy has that kind of pitch, everyone wants to know how to hold it, and you got guys tracing the ball with their fingers and where it's supposed to be and all that. So it's really cool. I mean, it's self-coaching. I don't need to do a thing. I just kind of sit back and watch. And Louis came with that came out of the box with him. So the one thing I do notice a lot though is guys who have good changeups struggle a lot of times with a breaking ball, and then vice versa. And you wonder if there's some sort of tenseness that you have, or some sort of strength issue you have in hands. A lot of times a really good changeup is a looser grip type of pitch, whereas a breaking ball is a little bit of a firmer type of grip. That's probably where that split or that fosh comes into play, Jon, that you were talking about. A lot of times guys who are a little bit tighter wound or a little bit firmer, it seems like the split works pretty well with them. But, the trick is trying to figure out feels and ways for guys to sort of move between those two pitches, to be loose and soft on the changeup, to be a little bit firmer with that breaking ball that they need to spin a little bit more. And it really is. It's probably why a lot of guys, they have that standalone pitch. They've got a great slider. They've got a great curveball, or they've got a great changeup, and the other side of it suffers some.
Interesting. So have you guys noticed any sort of correlation between like hand size and the ability to throw the changeup effectively? Similar to what we would notice on arm slots and curveballs and sliders. Some guys' arm slot just doesn't line up to that pitch shape. Have you noticed anything over the years as doing this, if there's a correlation between that?
Like in Louis' case, he's a slinger and he has really long fingers. And so probably alluding to what Jon said earlier, it does make a little bit of sense of why he can sort of roll off that pitch and make it do, certain things. I had Mikey Minor at Vanderbilt, who would be kind of the opposite of that, a little bit of a higher three-quarter type dude. Same thing, he had a really, really good changeup. So I've seen it all over the place. The thing I keep going back to, though, is sort of how they hold the ball and probably the firmness, that they possess inside of that. And then, I think you could add certain things like how their arm unravels, and then slot would probably be a product of that as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I would add to that.
Go
DJ,
ahead, Joel.
the other part to it too is also being able to manipulate the wrist a little bit. Seeing guys, it's not always necessarily getting inside the ball, but some guys are able to actually swipe through it and kind of create some side spin that way, and just being able to manipulate, not necessarily being locked in. If you're needing to add that change up as another pitch or advance it, I mean, I think that to your point, it's just the feel. Like most guys that have really great change up feel to pitch, and they're able to kind of manipulate that wrist angle and that hand angle, and that would be the only other thing that I would add beyond just the grip as well. Sorry, Matty, go ahead.
I just think it's kind of an interesting time where we can kind of take some of the mystique away from some of these pitches too, where like we can actually go in and look and see what like Luis Castillo's ball is actually doing to create that shape. So not that everybody can replicate it, but if you have a similar slot guy that throws balls similar fastball characteristics, like in theory, you can take that same approach and develop a changeup off of that fastball. Now, obviously, you need the tools and the tech to be able to approach it that way, but I think there is a little bit more science behind some of these pitch profiles that we're able to tap into now. So it's not just, oh, he's blessed with that. Like he is to a certain extent, but we can actually teach it. And DJ's working with Trevor now, and Trevor basically built his whole arsenal looking at other pitchers and wanted to replicate a lot of that. And that's a big strength of his, and sometimes it can get in the way of other things, but at the same time, like he's got a process where he can replicate other pitches by understanding, what are the physics to the pitch. So it's kind of an interesting time where we can look at other arsenals and kind of replicate them.
Well, our next question comes in from James Thornton, and he's directing it to the college coaches. Basically wants to know, what issues do you see coming in with your freshman pitchers? What are the things the high school kids are really struggling with once they get on campus into your programs?
I guess I'll lead off. For us, it's just put yourself back when you were that age. They're overwhelmed. You stand next to the guy next to you in the first bullpen, and he's just as good as you were, and there's 5 other guys that look like that. You've got class, you've got weights, you've got everything. So one of the things we've done to combat that, and a lot of programs have, is implementing a summer weightlifting program where they're able to come in, do summer school, do all those things, kind of get them set up to where at least their bodies aren't overwhelmed at the beginning. But I sound like a repeating summary, but for me, we're just trying to simplify it to the smallest part, not make it simpler, just keep it simple with these guys and try to get them to understand the development of how preparation is going to lead to their confidence. That it's consistent preparation on a daily basis that's going to give them their confidence. And they chose us, so they trust us. So here's the plan. Here's what we're working on. We're going to give you this today. We're going to give you that today. And you know what? It's kind of like a weight loss analogy. If you want to lose weight, you're not going to lose it all in one day. Someone's going to come back and see you in 3 months and say, man, you look better. But that's only if you stick with that program. You're eating right, you're exercising, you're doing those things. And so that's really what we're trying to teach them, those life skills that when they get done playing baseball and they're a firefighter or they're a lawyer, whatever they are, they understand the value of perseverance and hard work, dedication, organization, accountability. That's really where we start, is trying to get them into more of a comfort level and kind of goal set for them.
Caleb, John, Dave, you guys want to chime in on this?
Yeah, I'll chime in. First and foremost, all that stuff Gary said was absolutely accurate, but is getting them in routines. One of the things I've noticed when you get the high school pitcher is they're not used to throwing so many days during the week. Just like when college guys go into pro ball, there's different days of the week that they're throwing. It's going to be a different routine. I think that's one. Not being overwhelmed, as Gary said, is important. I think an important part of their development is, and this goes for all pitchers, not just freshmen, is they got to understand who they are and what they can be. What happens a lot when freshmen come in is they see guys, as Gary said, bigger and stronger, but they see guys throwing harder than them because of development and guys getting their man strength, and they want to be that, and they're not ready to be that yet. And the other part too, and I talk to all our freshman pitchers about it, is the game doesn't change. You have come up a level, but it's still 60 feet, 6 inches. And the hitters are stronger. The hitters are probably better, and there's probably more better hitters in a lineup, but the game doesn't change. It still comes down to strike one. It still comes down to executing pitches. But I think those are factors that all those young guys, when they walk in on a campus, have to, along with what Gary says, have to overcome and learn about themselves before they can ever develop and start taking strides forward.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's an evolution. You know, if you look at the definition of evolution, and we talk about it, I mean, evolution is a constant growth from the simple to the complex. You know, and they all come in thinking they've got everything figured out and trying to get straight to the complex part of it and skip the simplicity that Gary and Dave have talked about there. You know, so to me, the most important, or what you see those guys struggle with the most, is just no understanding, one, of who they are, and the inability to coach themselves. You know, I think that's something that is not given in high school and the travel ball levels. It's, hey, hold the grip this way, or hey, do it this way, and never have an understanding of how to make adjustments on their own, or move the baseball around in your hand to find a grip that fits you. You know, everything has to be taught. And I want them to take things and teach themselves. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things guys struggle with, is creating routines that find the structure for what allows them to do what they need to do best.
I'd like to close it out. I think a lot of times we try to give these guys doctorates before they've even, you know, got their master's degree. I got some of these young pitchers come in and they instantly want to be on the TrackMan. They instantly want to be on the Rapsodo. They instantly want to do all that. And I'm like, you got to learn to show up to practice on time and tie your shoes correctly and play catch. You know, like, you're asking for a doctorate degree when, like, let's get our, you know, junior high degree first. And I'm not, you know, treating them poorly. It's just like pitcher over there that you see, our 5th-year senior that we're breaking down, you know, pitch sequencing. You're not there yet, you know. And I think to Dave's point, that's one thing that will shock them initially. And you got to remember too, they're all starters. And, you know, the likelihood of your guy coming in and starting, you got to teach them the value of being a reliever, like we talked about earlier. There's a lot of things that need to go into that, but let's start early. Let's not give them too much too soon.
The reoccurring idea I keep hearing is routines, managing expectations, and weaving those expectations into those routines, and the importance of those things, whether it's in season, off season, training, in the weight room. Joel, questions to you. You know, how do you go about developing these routines and tying these routines into all aspects of the game of pitching?
God, yeah. I mean, listen to Gary talk about it. I mean, I would echo that. You know, it's not just about, you know, the routines of the mound and the arm care and all that stuff. I mean, you know, guys coming into professional baseball, and one thing that the Cleveland Indians that I've witnessed firsthand just do a tremendous job of is helping them develop routines off the field, coming in and being a professional athlete. And it was the same way as a college coach. I mean, I think, you know, freshman's first day on campus leading into their first week and into their first month, you're just trying to help them find normalcy, help them find their classrooms on time, you know, preferably introduce yourself to your professor, you know, be able to show up to the weight room on time, and finding those routines usually start first. And in professional baseball, for, you know, a large part of the population, it's similar in nature, because a lot of times in professional baseball, it's really your first time out on your own. And in our case, our guys come in from the draft, and they show up to Arizona, and we do a lot of our assessment stuff. And that kind of leads them into developing their own individual plans based on their workloads that they're bringing in. And how can we take those guys from that standpoint, collect data, be able to, you know, predict in the future kind of what future goals potentially could look like. But really it starts from day one with just developing routines off the field. Hey, this is where you're going to be living. Hey, when you get into a full season, this is what the typical schedule looks like. This is how you know, show up to the field prepared to work, or prepared to get into a scouting report, or whatever that day might look like, depending on, you know, where the cycle is for each guy. But for us, that's something internally that is incredibly important. Routines is something that's stressed literally from day one, from when our guys show up. And we feel like that, you know, a guy like Corey Kluber that was highly successful in our organization really set the tone for that, along with Trevor Bauer. I mean, you look at some of those guys, and even before those guys, the pitchers that have been really successful in our organization are really routine oriented. And they set those routines up individually. And you could just about bank, if you watch Corey Kluber showing up during spring training, you could just about guarantee where he was going to be each minute, each hour of the day leading into his throwing program or the game or bullpen or whatever he had going on. And so for us, we want to encourage our guys to develop off of that and become as individualized as we can.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious to find out, with the amount of years everybody has collectively, has there ever been a pitcher that y'all have had that did not have a solid routine but had success on the mound? What I'm getting at is, how many show and go guys have you coached who could just roll up to the ballpark and flat out deal, versus the guys who have had consistent success and have an established routine? How much do you think that routine plays into being able to perform when it's needed?
I'll jump in on this one because it's something I share with pitchers all the time. It was a guy by the name of Todd Helton. When I was at the University of Tennessee, and in my first year, it's a great story. We were indoors, and he was just coming off of football, and one of my good friends, Bill Mosiello, had been his pitching coach the year before, and Todd came walking by me. I said, Todd, we got to start getting some side throwing, some bullpens in. And Todd looked at me and says, Coach, I don't throw bullpens. I just pitch in the game. And I kind of chuckled at the time, but that's what Todd Helton did. And what he would do is he would look at me. He came out of the bullpen. He'd give me the windmill at first base. And that meant his arm was ready. Give me the ball. And I've never seen a guy that's, Gary's talked about it. I talk about it all the time, about routines and bullpens, game-like bullpens. Todd Helton didn't throw bullpens, but Todd Helton could throw a ball wherever he wanted to on every pitch. But that's the one guy in my career that I could say was the only guy that could do it that way. I'm sure other coaches have had guys like that. But after I saw Todd perform, and I could say throughout my career, he would fall in the top 3 or 4 best pitchers I've ever been around. Not that I coached him. I didn't coach him. He was on our team at the time. I didn't coach him. But his competitiveness, he was like a backyard guy. He was like playing wiffle ball. It was 2 arm angles. It was over the top. It was from the side. But he would go, when he did start, he'd throw a complete game, 75 pitches in an hour and 45 minutes. And here's a guy that never towed the rubber in the bullpen, but he just took his game to another level with his competitiveness when he got on the mound.
That's amazing. So in all your years of coaching, you've had one show and go guy who didn't need a routine. The rest of them, they've all needed that routine to establish any sort of success on the mound.
Absolutely.
I'm with you.
It's funny that you say that, Coach Serrano. Like one of our elder statesmen pitching coaches, it's funny, like first year I'm in our organization, he talks about, your routines tell the truth about your commitment level. But it's funny, it seems like we all have at least one of those guys that you can kind of point to and go, I don't know if it applies to that guy, but I would say for the large masses, it's like, to your point, and you've seen it, Coach, that's where your commitment level lies. It's like, how into your routine are you? And that, that gets in the mental game as well.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. Well, as coaches, you guys are constantly confronted with having difficult and awkward conversations. So how do you go about, and specifically, Matt, I'm interested in kind of hearing what you have to say with what you guys do at the Yankees. How do you go about having those difficult conversations with guys, whether it's about their routine or how are you establishing that rapport with those guys and delivering that message?
I think the big thing about having difficult conversations, that's something that I've kind of worked hard to get better at, and a lot of the help with, some of the things the Indians provide from a, leadership and development standpoint, but kind of thinking about having difficult conversations, trying to center these things up as objectively as possible. So whether we're talking about guys, making a team or getting cut, or guys having a role they don't like, or guys not improving, I think it's finding ways to establish like a baseline understanding of like, what are the things we value, and almost having, some principles that we're going to uphold at the beginning, whether it's, beliefs in certain statistics or it's belief in certain behaviors. And then it's getting, to partner with your players where you get them to explain to you, what do they value? Who do they think they are? And where do they want to go? And then I think from there, if they can identify, where they currently are and where they want to go, it allows us to have, a starting point for, okay, if that's the case, what do we have to do on a regular basis to hold you accountable to that? And then what does that feedback look like? And I think that's where you get to the point of having consistent quality feedback to the guys that's, very objective in nature, that's, basically using the things that we agreed upon up front, and you can take kind of some of the subjective part of it or the ego out of it and make it very almost like neutral in nature, where you're saying, like, we agreed upon certain things that we wanted to happen. Here's what's currently happening, positive or negative. And it kind of leads us down a path where we say we can either correct these behaviors and improve our standing in the group, or you can make this team, or we can continue to go down this path and it's not going to work. And I think one thing I've kind of learned over time is, like, you owe it to the player to be truthful with them. Like, it's going to hurt them and it's going to hurt you worse not to be upfront about what's happening. So I think if you don't have those upfront conversations about what you both value and where you think the player is, both from where he thinks he is and where you think he is, and then what the agreed upon path looks like, it's hard to have those conversations later because there's a lot of, unknown that's going to pop up. There's things that you haven't talked about that are going to, resonate in the conversation. So I think the more legwork you can do up front to have a baseline understanding of where each of you stand, it kind of helps eliminate some of the awkwardness of some of these conversations, and you don't avoid them as much because you have agreed upon standing that we can kind of, relate about.
Makes sense. Anybody else want to kind of chime in on that?
I mean, I could echo off of Matt, having seen it now. I mean, it's kind of crazy, the preparedness that goes into it. On top of that, watching our organization work the way that they work. I mean, we make decisions as groups. Everything is done as a group. We try to hear and value other people's opinions. And I just think in doing that and then taking as much objective information as you can to be able to go into those tough conversations, that allows you to really work together and then provide the player with the best opportunity to come out of that for growth. And then off of that, it's just really using our resources. That's something that's incredibly important to organizations, just continue to use the resources to be open and be honest and be able to partner with our players so that they can continue to grow in the future.
Makes sense.
Well, and I think too, it allows someone where I don't have a lot of experience at the level that I'm coaching at, but I think I still have the ability to square guys up on the things that they value and the things that we value as an organization. So, if we're talking about, take, Garrett Cole, for example, like, he's one of the best pitchers in the world, but if he envisions himself as one of the best pitchers in the world, he's going to do things on a regular basis that continue to, keep him at that level. So that's where it allows us to have, these kind of conversations. And obviously he's a unique case, but you go down the line of a lot of the pitchers in the discussion for our team, and there are things that they expect of themselves and there are things that we expect of them. And then it's just being able to, like, consistently provide that feedback of how things are going so we can adjust plans, we can adjust routines, we can tailor their work to maybe, shore up a pitch or shore up their strike rate, things along those lines. And that way nobody's caught off guard. We're not guessing about where we're going next. I think it allows you to have more detail and more focus to your conversations.
Makes sense.
I think one of the cool things about that is that players want the truth, especially as they move up. Unfortunately, I think they get lied to a lot. And, and I'm not pointing any sort of fingers or anything. I'm just saying, like, all through their career, their parents are definitely lying to them because they think they're, the greatest thing since sliced bread. That's what parents do. But they are getting lied to, and that might not be a bad thing, but players at a really high level, they want to know the truth because they want to be as good as they possibly can be. So the good part about that is once you develop a good relationship with guys, so there's the objective part of it, which these guys are talking about. And then there's probably the subjective piece of it too, which is what coaches do. This is what we do every day. Every guy on this channel, every guy that's listening to this is that we're in the business of helping guys, realize their potential. We're hoping that they trust us to do that. And so, from that end, once you develop that relationship with a player, it's easy to tell them the truth because that's what they want. It's what they need and it's what they want.
And I think to that point too, like once you develop the relationship, it allows you to know what level to have the conversation at or what venue or environment to have it in, because some guys don't always want to be told things in front of others. And so it's, protecting them a little bit in terms of, is it a private conversation? Is it in a group, situation? And I think, finding the right avenue to have the conversation to, either impact their behavior or, allow them to appreciate that they're doing well. I think that it's just knowing that relationship is underlying a lot of it, because that's going to determine how they accept the feedback a lot of times too.
Makes sense.
I'll ask a question again, especially Coach Adcock, Coach Serrano, all you guys, a lot of experience in it. I think something that you see is when you've got really good players, especially collegiately in our programs, you talk about these tough conversations with, hey, you want this guy to lead or you want this guy to show the direction that you want things to go. But what he perceives as the reality and what you perceive as the truth are so far apart. What are some things that you guys have done in the past to kind of pull that middle ground so that you don't give past your standards, but also can pull a piece that could be a really big part of your team into what you're trying to do?
I tell players oftentimes they're a fast food generation, man. If they don't get their food in 60 seconds, they want it free. And I think what I try to relay to them is it's going to take a while for you to become that pitcher that you want to be. You got to consistently prepare on a daily basis in order to build that confidence in it. You got to have patience in your development. The first thing we talk about when we get in there is we're just going to attack hitters. That's it. That's all we're going to do. Attack hitters. When the NCAA came out with this 20-second clock, I audibly laughed. That never approaches us. We don't leave the dirt. We stand on the dirt. We attack hitters. We try to show them, Caleb, and you've been with me, that like there's examples in front of you. You want to pitch like Trevor Oakes? Then this is how he went through it. This is the development of it, but it's going to take some time. You want to pitch like Tyson Miller? It's going to take some time. He didn't look like that 3 years ago. So for me, with the examples in front of them, I think that's the best way to show them that they got to have some patience with their growth and development. And that's an honest conversation we have early on.
And Caleb, I'll answer that the same way. I think what I have found over my career, especially in this generation that we're dealing with now, goes back to what DJ said. It's just being absolutely honest with these kids. I think they respect a lot more if you're upfront and honest with them than if you're trying to skirt reality to them. I think they're going to eventually figure it out if you're not being truthful with them. And I think being upfront and honest with them, even if it's that tough conversation, in the end, he'll become a better player and he's going to have a lot more respect for you as a coach and will probably play harder for you because, as DJ said, a lot of people haven't been truthful with him. And now you're standing up to him and being honest with him. And that's growth for them in my mind.
Awesome. Well, Jon, I want to toss it back over to you. It seems like one of the reoccurring themes here is this road to development is it's got potholes all over it of difficult conversations and communicating difficult things via their timeline and when they're going to be able to perform. So yeah, how do you kind of assess the timeline of someone's development, specifically at the level that you're at? I mean, you've put through quite a few phenomenal pitchers coming out of Parkland. How do you kind of navigate that roadmap of development and those difficult conversations with your guys?
Yeah, for us, it's definitely unique considering a lot of our guys, we only have them for maybe 10 to 20 months, 10 to 22 months max. If it's a one and done, a freshman guy, we're not going to have him that long. So when we're trying to develop him or any of the athletes, the efficiency is really key. Because kind of like the other coaches are saying, guys are guys are looking for instant gratification. So obviously trying to explain that to them right away, that it is a bit of a process. But for me, I'm trying to expedite that process as fast as I can, because guys don't come to Parkland College to win an NJCAA World Series. They just don't. Like, that's not why they sign up to play for us. If we end up doing that along the way, great. If we win a lot of games, great. They come here because they eventually want to play for, 4-year programs that have a lot of success and move on. It's nothing more than a stepping stone for them, which is fine. I think it's better to recognize that as a coach, as opposed to maybe try to play that down and think that it's a selfish approach by the players. I don't think it is. So for us, it's, how do I prioritize what's going to get them either to the pro level out of Parkland or to high level baseball at the 4-year level as fast as possible. And that's one thing, I'm not going to have a freshman and have a 4-year plan for him. I'm not going to draft a high school guy and have a 7-year plan for him, or an international signee or something like that. When my guys get in, it's understanding what the 4-year level or the pro level is currently prioritizing themselves as far as what's at the forefront at recruiting. Obviously, velocity is right there at the top. So one of the first things that we try to do is add velocity to all of our guys as much as possible. That's a big part of our development plan, because at the end of the day, that's something that's at the forefront as far as what is garnering attention for pitchers. And whether you agree with it or not, or like it or not, it's there. And my job isn't necessarily to agree with it in terms of whether I think that's the end all be all as a pitcher. My job is to try to get the guys moved on as best I can. So we really prioritize a lot. We don't. If you spend a week at our practice, there will be 0 minutes of shagging or running poles, or honestly even PFPs, and not because I don't think it's important, because I don't know of too many 4-year coaches that have ever called me and asked. The first thing they asked was, how's he fielding his position? It's they whip out their radar guns, or they ask his velocity, or they ask about the breaking ball, which is obviously becoming more and more popular and a bigger part of it. More pro guys are using it in, and we probably throw more percentage of breaking balls than most, despite the fact that we typically have some pretty hard throwers. But it's understanding, whatever our training economy is, the hours that we have with the guys, we're only going to spend time doing things that are going to help enhance their skill set, that's going to hopefully get them to the 4-year level or to the draft. Because like I said, we only have 1 to 2 years with the guys. So I really don't have a whole lot of time for the other stuff. And like I said, it's not a perfect world. It's, there are things that maybe we don't spend a lot of time on that I know is a big part of being a legitimate, fully complete pitcher. But I don't think anybody's expecting these guys to be finished products and be complete pitchers once they walk out of junior college. The 4-year coaches are hoping to get a guy that has enough velocity to hang at that level and has a banger breaking ball that has swing and miss, because they can take that and kind of run with the rest and do their thing and kind of finish off the product. So with us, it's definitely different. And, that's honestly one of the reasons why I like the junior college level so much. There's no red tape here. I can do what I want, when I want, with who I want, and nobody's there to stop me from no idea is a bad idea in that regard from a training standpoint. And, the players are the litmus test, and they give me all the feedback I need. And they kind of, to be honest, they kind of run the show themselves to a certain extent. And I think that's probably why it works a little bit for us. But yeah, the efficiency and timeline, I think, is definitely important. I know the other guys can, they're going to have guys for 4 years or longer at the pro level. Their mindset is probably completely different than mine, because it's a lot more long-term. And I know junior college is unique because it's funny, guys go junior college to perform or to develop and kind of buy those extra years of development. But if you don't produce right away, you're in a bind. If you're a sophomore at a 4-year and you're not producing right away, you're a sophomore at a 4-year, and there's still time to develop. If you're a sophomore and you're not producing at Parkland, it's tough mentally. You start thinking about some things that maybe you don't want to get into your head about where your career's going next and stuff like that. So it's definitely a unique pressure that comes with it. I've heard 4-year coaches say that, junior college guys don't necessarily have a feel for the total grind of 4-year baseball. And I disagree with that. We don't fly anywhere. We don't have a fancy bus. If you're not playing well, you're worrying about recruitment all the time, and it's tough. So, kind of spoke a little bit longer than I expected, but I'm passionate about that, as far as how the junior college development works versus others, and kind of the obstacles that we have. But I'll let some of the other guys jump in.
Yeah, guys, just to give you a heads up, we're approaching our time limit. So if you guys want to kind of chime in on what development looks like within your programs, that'll probably be a good way to wrap it up.
Well, I'd echo a little bit of, what he said there. I think, having overseen a little bit of like a minor league development, there's probably some semblance of, developing stuff that can get you out at the highest level. Like ultimately we're solving for us, like how do we get major league hitters out? So, A-ball, we're not necessarily concerned about how well you control the running game. Now, will that be a factor later on down the road? Absolutely. I think the environment kind of dictates a little bit of like where the roadmap goes. So if we're trying to get wins in the SEC, like you better be able to control the running game and field your position. If we're in the Midwest League, that's probably not going to stop you from getting promoted. So I think that at that point we're saying, did you improve your pitch quality, or did you improve your strike rate, or did you improve your ability to repeat your delivery, and try and put some big rocks and like, what's the biggest window of adaptation for you? Like what's going to make the biggest improvement to get you closer to the major league version of yourself? And then as we get closer, now I'm staring at the AAA pitching coach asking like, why can't this guy control the running game? Like that's now a problem. So, on the flip side, I used to say like, well, that wasn't our job, So I think there's always a balance of, depending on what game you're solving for, is going to dictate a little bit of like where the development's focus is.
I think most people are probably on this call because they want to develop pitchers, and I just hope that we can all remember that we're all in it together. The youth coach that's on this, he's trying to get that young man to love the game, and just love the game and enjoy it and find passion in it. And the high school coach is going to take that commitment level to a new level, and the travel coach is going to expose them to better competition, and the personal coach is going to do a one-on-one session that we all can't with time constraints. And as college coaches, I think we're teaching them life lessons. And then if they're fortunate enough to move on and, play for Derek and Matt and Joel, then now they're getting that doctorate, and they're now taking it even to an advanced skill set. So I think sometimes lost in the Twitter world and the Instagram world is we got to work through it together. We're all working on it together. And I think sometimes we just skip steps along that process of development, and we're teaching the 6-year-old about TrackMan instead of teaching them to love the game. And I think that can be devastating to our game.
I'll chime in and close on this development of just keeping it simple. You've heard the coaches say that. Quality repetition over and over. I think that's something that sometimes players lose focus, is quality repetition. And from a pitching standpoint, simplify of a 3-step process. And this came from Coach Kincaid years ago, a wonderful junior college coach. It's a 3-step process. Number 1, throw strikes. Number 2, be able to throw the ball in and out or up and down in the strike zone. And number 3, be able to throw the ball in and out. If you do those 3 aspects, I don't care if you throw 82, I don't care if you throw 102, you have a chance to be successful. You have a chance to get a lot of guys out and be a successful pitcher. So simplify it and continue quality repetition on a daily basis.
Well, the good part about this for me, fellas, is that you're never done. Your players are never going to be done. Talked about Louis Castillo and how good his changeup was, and it's great. But in order for Louis to be great, and I would say Louis is good right now. I'd say he's really good. But I'd say he's going to have to develop further to be what we would consider a great pitcher. So, to me, this isn't unique to a junior college guy or a college guy. I think this is not unique at all. If we're working with a player, our job is to make them better, whether it's at a high school, a college, or a professional level. It's all the same.
Nice. Joel, Caleb, anything you guys would like to add?
Yeah, I'll reiterate, Gary, I think it steps for all of us. I've heard DJ talk about that as well and had that conversation. I've, as a young coach, really would get caught up and like, man, if these guys aren't getting a chance to play at the next level, I'm not doing my job. But I think for all of us, the most important thing is giving them the best of yourself with your relationships, with the step that your players are at. And every guy's at a little bit of different spot. You got guys such as myself as a player that would have never had a chance to put on a pro uniform. You've got guys who got a chance to be big leaguers, but really just diving into each one of them individually, building good relationships, helping them achieve their max potential. And for us, walk across the stage, graduate, and do the best they can life-wise while contributing to the baseball side of it. I think that's all we can ask for in our development.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I listen to these guys talk. I mean, the thing that just keeps coming to my mind is just like, as a coach, good development of your players is just you being, really exceedingly human. I think about that honesty factor that goes behind that and building the relationships. But the development is obviously on the field, but it's also off. And, I think for every one of our coaches on the panel and every coach that's listening, at some point in time, these, your players are going to end up in the real world. And, the lessons that you're teaching them now, I mean, between routines, being competitive, being able to manage different situations, all those things equate to real life. And that's the beauty of baseball. I mean, I know that that's kind of the common statement that gets made in these things, but it just feels like that, it's be persistent, it's be extremely human with your players and continue to nudge them forward.
Makes sense. Well, folks, that's about all the time we have this evening. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to everybody on our panel. Guys, thank you so much for participating. For those of you that don't know, the ABCA is a nonprofit organization. We are offering this content out to everybody in the baseball world for free. And I can't thank you guys enough for doing this. Thank you for giving up all this time, and we really appreciate it. I also want to thank our production team, PAC Network, our sponsor, Pocket Radar. Huge thank you to Pocket Radar. Without these guys, this stuff doesn't happen. So thank you. If you missed something or clicked into the episode a little late because of a couple technical glitches that we will have worked out before next week, just want to remind you that this episode will be archived on our website. And you'll be able to view it on demand within the coaching resource library section of our website and the My ABCA mobile app that is accessible only by members. Make sure to tune in next week as we are going to discuss culture and leadership. The current panel is Tim Corbin from Vanderbilt University, Craig Giannino from University of San Francisco, Rich Benjamin from Indiana Wesleyan, and Pete Savage from Reno High School in Nevada. We're currently talking with one or two additional coaches to add them to the panel, but next Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So on behalf of everyone here at the ABCA, Craig Kylitz, John Litzfield, Juan Clark, Zach Hale, Maddie West, Sarah Barlock, Ryan Brownlee, and Mike Odom, thank you and stay safe out there. Tonight's episode of At Home Perspectives is made possible by Pocket Radar. Pocket Radar's smart coach app system, with its unique ability to automatically capture videos with embedded velocities, allows coaches to continue to work remotely with their players and utilize video for digital recruiting opportunities. Stay connected with your players by having them share their videos with verified speed data to make sure that they are staying in shape and continuing to get better. Pocket Radar's Bring Your Training Home initiative will provide education and resources, including webinars and a limited time discount to help players remotely train, develop, and be seen at home with video analysis tools. Check out their 2020 Expo Theater presentation, Digital Age Recruiting and Organizing Your Data with Systems like Driveline Track, located in the ABCA Video Library.